He got the promotion on my birthday and fired me before lunch. Name's Carl 61, forklift driver turned night janitor, still carried my 20-year badge in a cracked leather wallet. Funny how the coffee tasted burnt that day, like even the break room knew it was betrayal. Ever been dismissed by your own blood? My body had barely cooled before Crosby handed my widow a letter asking her to leave the house. We built that home together, every brick, every board, and now they were calling it his. The church was packed with folks who remembered my barbecue sauce more than my birthday. Reverend George stood under the faded wooden cross, dabbing sweat from his brow, as he skipped over half my life, like I'd been the man who fixed gutters, not the man who built Gwendore's world. And through it all, Gwendore sat straight-backed in the third pew, her gloved fingers wrapped tight around that old, worn leather Bible, the same one we used on our wedding day in 1983. As he read Psalm 23, George cast one glance, just one, toward Crosby. My son didn't flinch. He kept his steel smile on jaw-tight hair, too neatly parted. The man had all the warmth of cold marble. Gwendore didn't cry. She never did in public. But when Charlotte leaned over and offered her a paper napkin, she took it and pressed it to the corner of one eye with the same care she used folding linen. That was my girl, always tidy in grief. The reception in the basement was a flurry of deviled eggs and oversweet punch. The ladies' circle moved like well-dressed buzzards, murmuring kind words, then turning to whisper about how sudden it all was. I'd had a bad heart for years. Nothing sudden about dying slow. Tressa, our youngest, stayed close to her mother but said little. She never liked being watched, and today she felt like a beetle pinned under glass. But it was Crosby who made the first move, slick gray suit folder tucked under one arm like a briefcase. "Mom," he said gently, as if pretending kindness this came from the estate attorney. They wanted me to deliver it personally. She took the envelope. Her hands didn't shake, but her red nail polish had chipped. She'd done them herself last night in silence while listening to the ceiling fan creak. Back home, the porch light was already off. She noticed it right away. Wendell always left it on until everyone was in. The house looked foreign now, same curtains, same hydrangeas by the steps, but something had shifted. The key still worked, but the silence inside was louder than the organ had been. In the kitchen, she opened the envelope on the counter. The letter was typed all legalese. Pursuant to estate consolidation and real property distribution, the occupant is respectfully requested to vacate the premises within 30 days. No mom. No dear Gwendore. Just a clean surgical extraction. She didn't cry. Instead, she walked straight to the den, what Wendell called his study, though it mostly held books he never finished and tax folders. The air smelled like lemon polish and memories. There on the corner desk sat the Bible again. Somehow it had made it from the church to here. Tressa must have brought it. She opened it carefully, and a folded piece of lined paper slipped out from between Chronicles and Psalms. Wendell's handwriting, slanted, slightly shaky. "If you're reading this, darlin', I'm gone. And if Crosby gives you trouble, remember you built that house long before he learned to crawl. Love you always, Wendell." The letter was short, and maybe that's what made it hit harder. Wendell had never been long-winded, but he never wasted words. She sat down in his chair. The leather sighed under her. Outside, a mockingbird chirped like nothing had changed. But she had. Her grief shifted, still heavy, but now balanced with something sharper. She pressed the letter back into the Bible, closed it, and held both close to her chest. She let out one long, steady breath. "Not yet, Wendell," she whispered. "I'm not leaving. I had always kept records of equipment repairs, contractor payments, even barbecue rubs." Gwendore inherited that habit, and now it was saving her. The study still smelled like lemon oil and pencil shavings. Light filtered through the blinds and crooked slats, settling dust onto the mahogany desk like a slow snowfall. The ceiling fan ticked every fourth turn, same way it had for 20 years. I used to joke that it sounded like a conscience catching its breath. Gwendore never laughed at that. She just tilted her head and said, "Maybe that's because it is." She stood in the doorway now, arms crossed, eyes sweeping the room like she was reading a language only she and Wendell knew. Tressa hovered just outside, holding 2 cups of tea. She didn't step in. You sure you want to start this? Tressa asked gently. I have to, Gwendare said. If I don't claim my place now, I'll lose it. She didn't mean the house. Not really. She meant something quieter. Something thicker than brick and wood dignity, maybe. Memory. The filing cabinet creaked like an old hymn bench. Top drawer, electrical invoices, paint samples, warranties from Sears so old they might as well have been printed on papyrus. But tucked in between a property tax bill and a contractor's quote for kitchen tile was a home repair receipt from 2004, scribbled in Wendell's handwriting in the margin in his favorite blue felt pen. Joint ownership, confirm with Gwen. She set it aside. Her breath was even, but her jaw was tight. The next file was labeled simply House Docs. Inside, she found receipts going back to the early 90s HVAC repair, new gutters foundation work. Wendell had circled his half of the cost in red, and in a few margins he'd written notes. Discuss with G or Gwen paid this one. Then she saw it. A faded printout folded once and tucked between folders like a bookmark forgotten in a long-closed novel. She unfolded it slowly. From Wendell G. Avery to Samuel Powell Escrow. Subject deed revision. Sam Gwen's name needs to be on the deed. She built this home same as me. Let's fix that. Can we meet next week? The timestamp was from February 2022, 6 weeks before the funeral. Her fingers hovered over the line that read, She built this home same as me. It landed somewhere between an apology and a promise. Tressa had stepped in now, scanning over her mother's shoulder. That's his email to Mr. Powell. Gwendare nodded. It is. Tressa frowned. But is it enough? Oh, her mother said quietly. But it's a start. Digging deeper, Gwendare found a manila envelope labeled Pending Legal. Inside a carbon copy of a draft deed transfer naming her as co-owner. The bottom had a space for 2 signatures. One was already there, Wendell's. The second was blank. She sat down in Wendell's chair, folded the draft in her lap. The ceiling fan creaked again once, twice. Then on the 4th turn it groaned a little louder, almost like it knew. The phone rang. Gwendare jumped slightly. Blinking away the fog of paper and memory, she answered it on the 2nd ring. This is Gwendare Avery, a soft voice responded. Mrs. Avery, this is Malia from Powell & Associates. I wasn't sure if I should call, but I recognized the number from the office line. I worked with your husband. On some things, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Gwendare took a breath. Thank you, Malia. Can I ask you something? Of course. Was he trying to change the deed? Make sure I had legal claim. There was a pause. Papers rustling faintly on the other end. Yes, Malia said. He had an appointment for March 9th. He passed on the 2nd. We had the documents prepped, but they weren't signed yet. I found a draft, Gwendare said. His signature's on it, just not mine. I remember he asked to hand sign, Malia added. Said it felt more real that way. Gwendare swallowed. Thank you, that helps more than you know. After she hung up, the silence returned. Heavier now, but not hollow. She took the unsigned deed draft and carried it carefully to the mantel. Set it next to the Bible, the one with the wedding ribbons still tucked between pages of Corinthians. Then she whispered, Then I'll sign what you couldn't. Outside, the wind lifted gently through the pine trees like someone exhaling after a long-held breath. Reverend George stopped by with banana bread and a prayer request, but the real sermon was silence. The porch boards creaked under his weight, just like they used to when Wendell brought out coffee on Sundays. But Wendell wasn't here, and the coffee hadn't been made. Only a cooling breeze and a rocking chair, with its slow, aching rhythm, greeted the preacher now. Miss Gwendare George said, shifting the foil-wrapped loaf from one hand to the other. Made you something sweet, thought you might need it. She didn't take the bread right away. You come to check on the widow, she said, voice calm, hands folded. Or to check if she's stirring trouble? He blinked, then smiled with that slow drawl people mistake for kindness. Now let's not frame things like that. Just wanted to say we've been praying, and to drop off this. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a neatly folded slip of paper. A prayer list, he said. She opened it. Tressa's name wasn't on it, neither was hers. Nothing wrong with prayer, she said, folding it back. But some names are conspicuously absent. George cleared his throat. Church folk don't like conflict, Gwendoray. You know that. We're trying to keep unity. She motioned to the house behind her. Unity? You mean silence. The banana bread still sat untouched between them. A bee circled, tempted by the scent of sugar and spring. Azaleas flared pink along the edge of the porch, but they'd always had thorns. Beauty that cut if you leaned too close. I can't stand in the middle of a family matter, he said. Crosby sent me an eviction letter at your pulpit, George. At Wendell's funeral, that's not family, that's legal theft. He sighed and looked out toward the street. Across the way, Loretta's curtain dipped, watching. I just don't want to cause more pain. Gwendoray stood slow and deliberate. Then you're mistaking comfort for compassion, and pain for clarity. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. Proverbs 11:1, Reverend. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him. His face twitched just once, but she saw it. I'll be going now, he said, setting the banana bread on the rail. You know where to find me. Church doors are always open. She didn't answer. Just stood there, arms crossed, until his boots clacked back down the walk. Inside the house breathed differently now. Gwendoray moved through it like one does in a museum, careful not to disturb what remains of meaning. The walls seemed quieter since Wendell passed, but not gentler. His old Bible sat just off-center on the mantel, nudged, not fallen. She reached to straighten it, and there it was, the white ribbon. It had frayed, just at the end, like something loved too long and too hard, like something that had been opened often but not recently, a wound that never closed, just curled. She sat down in Wendell's rocker. The chair accepted her weight like it remembered her. She could still hear the faint squeak of the ceiling fan 4 turns, and then a stutter just like Conscience, Wendell used to say. It wasn't just George. That week, 3 women from the ladies' circle canceled their usual Thursday call. Said they were real busy helping set up the youth bake sale. No one brought casseroles anymore. At the grocery store, Gwendoray caught Charla Beth turning down the detergent aisle too quick. They were siding with comfort. And comfort always sides with whoever holds the pen. The banana bread sat on the porch rail all night. No one touched it. The foil glinted in the street lamp like a sealed warning. Gwendoray didn't cry. She just folded the ribbon back into the Bible's spine, lit a candle, and whispered toward the ceiling fan. You were right, Wendell. Conscience does squeak, just not loud enough. The ribbon snapped when she pulled the Bible open. It didn't break clean, just unraveled like patience. The morning had already threatened to unravel her. Her blouse didn't sit right. The hem of her skirt caught a loose splinter on the dining chair. And now the ribbon Wendell had used to mark Ecclesiastes for the past 40 years gave out with a soft tearing sound. Not a dramatic snap, just a tired pull like old fabric surrendering. She didn't bother to trim it, just closed the Bible with the ribbon tucked in crooked. There wasn't time for neatness today. Tressa had texted Mom, I looked into Crosby's title transfer. It's fishy. Lawyers shady too. Gwendoray didn't ask how her daughter had managed it. Tressa was persistent in quiet ways like a root working through concrete. Wendell had always said so. Downtown Mobile had changed. The street she drove down used to have a post office with creaky steps and a sandwich shop that sold sweet tea for $1. Now a 3-story glass facade rose where the church used to stand. The new law office gleamed like teeth in a sales pitch. Inside, the waiting room smelled of lemon cleaner and ambition. The kind of ambition that didn't wait for funerals to finish before drawing up paperwork. She sat across from a young woman with a clipboard and glasses. The nameplate read, Marcy Dubois-esque. Mrs. Lionel Marcy began. Voice smooth, efficient. I've reviewed the title chain and hospital records you sent. It appears your son used a durable power of attorney granted March 14, 2022, during your husband's final hospitalization. Gwendoray nodded once. I didn't sign that document. You didn't need to. Wendell signed while admitted apparently lucid, though that can be contested. Convenient timing, she murmured. Very, Marcy agreed. But here's the part you might want to act on today. You can revoke all prior authorizations. If we move fast, we can stall any future transfers until this is sorted legally. Gwendoray reached into her handbag and produced a notarized letter she'd signed with Tressa's help that morning. Already done. Marcy's eyebrows lifted in appreciation. You came prepared. You'd be surprised what grief clarifies. The law clerk brought in a flash drive inside a clear plastic envelope. We found this in Mr. Linnell's safe deposit box, Marcy said. It's labeled WendellFinal.M4A. Might be important. The moment she heard his voice, the air left the room. This house, it's hers, always has been. If she ever needs proof, this is it. Don't let the paperwork fool you, she built it more than I ever did. It was Wendell's voice, tired but certain, recorded with purpose. A confession, a declaration, and a benediction all in one. She closed her eyes. The ribbon may have torn, but the words held. She didn't need anyone's blessing now. She already had Wendell's. Gwendaria stood the Bible and the flash drive tucked into her handbag like sacred things. The untouched coffee on the lobby table had gone cold. It didn't matter. Outside the building, a breeze kicked up the scent of blooming gardenias and car exhaust. She paused on the steps, letting the sunlight touch her hands. It had been weeks since she noticed the warmth of anything. She opened her phone and typed a quick message to Tressa. We have Wendell's voice. I'm ready. Just before she stepped into her car, she looked up at the glass building one more time. Reflected in it was a memory, Wendell laughing as he painted their fence white, sunburnt and proud. She held on to it, tucked it inside next to the fire, now growing in her belly. Time to go to war, she whispered. Not to anyone, just herself. The phone rang at 10:43 p.m. Gwendaria had just rinsed her teacup when it vibrated across the table. She let it buzz once, twice, then picked up, not because she wanted to talk, but because she knew who it had to be. Ma Crosby's voice cracked on the second syllable. It had the same raw edge as the night Wendell had his stroke. Can we talk? She didn't answer right away. In the silence, the cicadas outside screamed into the humidity. The kitchen smelled of lemon soap and regret. Finally, she pulled a chair back and sat. I'm listening, she said, calm as Sunday morning. I messed up, he said. The business went under. The bank called in everything. I needed something solid for collateral. Something that meant something. You mean this house? She asked. He hesitated. It wasn't just the house. It was him. The last thing I had left of him. I thought if I saved it, kept it in the family. You forged a power of attorney to do that, she said. That's not saving. That's stealing. You would have said no. He blurted. You always did. Every idea, every project. You and Dad always so careful, so small. That house is not small, she said. Neither was he. And neither is what you did. There was silence. Then they're reviewing the file tomorrow. At court. You should come. The call ended not with a click, but with a breath, like the weight of shame had finally pressed his lungs shut. The next morning, the probate court hall was washed in pale light. Dew clung to the stairs, like the building itself was reluctant to wake. Gwendaria sat on the stone bench outside her Bible, and the flash drive tucked into her handbag. She didn't tremble, but the bench was cold against her back, and that reminded her she was alive and alone. Inside, the air smelled of floor polish and old paper. Marcy met her by the security gate, lips pressed into a line. They're trying to suppress the file, she whispered. But the judge wants full review. Gwendaria nodded. Let them listen, he was clear. The hearing room was plain white walls, wooden pews, the kind of place where the truth was supposed to sit like sunlight on polished oak. Crosby sat at the front, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. He didn't look up. When the file played, Wendell's voice crackled through the speaker. This house, it's hers. Always has been. If she ever needs proof, this is it. Even the clerk stilled. The judge blinked slowly. The opposing attorney asked for a recess. In the hallway, Crosby slumped against the wall like a man who'd finally remembered gravity. His tie was askew. His pen, trembling, dropped from his fingers. When he looked up, his eyes weren't angry. They were hollow. It was the only thing I had left that was still his, he whispered. Gwendaria stood over him, not cruelly, but with the quiet distance of someone who has seen a storm from both sides. And now it's the only thing you've lost. She turned and walked back into the courtroom, her heels steady on the marble floor. Outside, the jasmine was late in bloom. just like after Wendell's stroke, but it bloomed nonetheless. The house sold in 14 minutes. 2 clicks, 1 confirmation, and it was gone just like that. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a flicker on the screen and a dull ache in my chest that refused to name itself. I didn't cry, not when I saw the confirmation email, not when I signed the digital deed, and not when I boxed up Wendell's last pair of overalls, still hanging behind the laundry door, where they'd lived for 15 years. Early summer in Mobile always felt too clean to me, like the heat hadn't yet gotten dirty with sweat and dust. The magnolia tree out front had bloomed heavy that year, but its petals browned quicker than usual, bruised by the flock of starlings that had nested too close. I watched them scatter as I folded the last dish towel. Funny thing, Wendell always said a home wasn't a place, it was a person. He'd say that while sanding floorboards or patching the roof like the man could convince the wood to listen. I left the Bible out center of the dining table. The ribbon once torn was stitched back together by Tressa's hand, a soft yellow thread winding through the white. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was, but it held. Marcy handled the logistics like she always did, efficient and kind in equal measure. "You don't have to come in, Gwendoray," she'd said. "I can close it from my office." But I wanted to be there for the last walkthrough. The buyers, a young couple in their 40s, arrived, with quiet voices and tired eyes. He wore a shirt with a faded nonprofit logo on the chest. She had a clipboard and calloused hands. They looked at the house like it was already a memory. That told me everything I needed. I walked them through every room without speaking much. I pointed once to the ceiling fan Wendell had never fixed, still squeaked every 4th turn, and once to the pantry floorboard that groaned with the weight of old stories. The wife touched the kitchen windowsill and smiled. "This light," she murmured, "it's generous." That was enough for me. I'd sold them the place well below market rate with one condition written in bold. Across the final line, "This property must be used for transitional housing for widowed women within 12 months of purchase." Marcy had raised an eyebrow, but she'd drawn up the paperwork like I asked. When we returned to the kitchen, Tressa stood at the counter, her hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug that had outlived 2 dishwashers. "Mama," she said slowly, "are you really doing this for them after everything?" I looked at her. The worry in her shoulders, the confusion in her voice, and I understood. "Yes," I said. "Because someone has to start the healing. Might as well be the one who's got nothing left to lose." She turned away, pretending to refill the mug, but I saw the tears hitch in her throat. She didn't cry often, my girl. But when she did, it was never for herself. Before I left, I placed a small wooden box on the front porch. Inside were Wendell's tools, his favorites, the ones he used to patch neighbors' fences and build Sunday school benches. I left them there without a note. They'd know. I didn't tell Crosby I was selling. I just mailed him the signed transfer and a short letter. This was never about punishment. It was a reminder of what we build when we build with love and what we lose when we forget. He didn't reply. That night, the house was still and hollow. I slept at Tressa's, but I returned the next morning alone to close the door for the last time. I didn't rush. I took in every creak of the floor, every sun-faded photograph, every ghost of Sunday breakfasts and Christmas lights. And just before I turned the key in the lock, I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had carried children, kneaded bread, and held Wendell's across a hospital bed, and I whispered, "You were right, love. It was never the house." The cicadas began to hum. I smiled, pressed the stitched ribbon between the Bible's pages, and walked away. They didn't call me Miss Dulcie anymore. Not after the court hearing, not after the house sold to that sweet couple from Huntsville who wanted to turn it into something soft and healing. Not after Reverend George stood up 2 Sundays ago and said my name without flinching. Now it was Mrs. Linnell again. Even Loretta, who once said I dressed too proud for a widow, crossed the street with a pound cake wrapped in cling film and handed it over without a word, burned around the edges, still warm. It sat on my counter for 2 days before I touched it, but it meant something. Jubilee Sunday had always marked a kind of resurrection for our little church. No scripture-heavy sermons, just food, music, and air so thick you could feel it behind your knees. The ceiling fans clicked like old typewriters, and the walls sweated alongside the rest of us. This year, I wore Wendell's favorite shade of blue, the same cotton dress from our 25th anniversary dinner. Tressa had stitched the hem where time had tugged it loose, and I ran my fingers over that seam like it held the years together. When I walked in, heads turned. Some out of habit, some in apology. I didn't need either. I nodded, took my seat near the back like I always did, and waited. The choir sang 2 hymns too long, and nobody complained. A toddler shrieked mid-verse, and the sound made me smile. The sanctuary was alive, even if some hearts still lagged behind. Reverend George finally stepped up, his suit sticking at the shoulders. He cleared his throat, eyes flicking to the altar, then to me. Before we blessed this meal, he began, voice wobbling at the edges. We want to thank someone who reminded us what faith looks like, when it stands firm, not loud. Mrs. Gwendoray Linnell has graciously provided the seed for our new Widows Transition Fund, housed in the same place where her family lived for generations. There was polite clapping at first. Then someone shouted amen, and it spread like fire catching dry grass. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I just nodded once and folded my hands in my lap. Charlotte slid in beside me a moment later, her hands full of napkins and a half-empty pitcher of sweet tea. I never knew how to stand up, she whispered. But I should have. Back when Crosby. Back when everything, her words fluttered away like tissue in the wind. I didn't pick them up. You know now, I said. That's what matters. After the food baked mac deviled eggs. Too many types of cobbler, we gathered back into the pews. No program, just breathing and stories and a little gospel humming from the choir pit. I stood slowly, no invitation, no pressure, just a need rising from my ribs. In my hands, the Bible felt heavier than usual, maybe because the ribbon, now stitched with soft yellow thread by Tressa's own fingers, had been looped back into place. It didn't look new, just healed. I walked to the altar. This never belonged to me alone, I said, voice barely carrying past the third row, so I'm giving it back to where it came from. Reverend George stepped forward, eyes wet. Would you honor us, Mrs. Linnell, by reading one more time? I opened to Psalm 46. Wendell's handwriting filled the margins, notes from years of Sunday debates and porch talks and stubborn quiet. I read slow. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. I looked up after the final line. The room held its breath, and then it let go. As I made my way back down the aisle, the floor didn't creak beneath my heels. The air felt thinner, lighter, like someone had opened a window in the middle of July. Outside, the cicadas were already in full song. The sky threatened rain, but hadn't committed yet. Tressa stood near the steps, arms crossed, a grin working its way across her cheek. You ready to see what we did with the porch? She asked. I nodded, Bible still warm in my hands. Lead the way. And we walked toward whatever came next. The porch looked the same, but now it belonged to 10 women who had nowhere else to go. They stood there that morning with their cardboard boxes and cloth duffels, peering up at the painted sign, Porch Lighthouse. The name had been hand-lettered in soft blue by a girl named Leona, who wore her hair in a tidy bun and still flinched when someone closed a door too hard. Gwendoray had only met her twice before, but today she greeted her like an old neighbor. In the kitchen, the coffee pot hissed, overworked already. There was cinnamon toast on mismatched plates, basil drying on a rack by the window. The house still smelled of pine and mothballs, but laughter, real and rising, cut through it like spring sun through shutters. Outside, Gwendoray knelt in the garden bed she and Wendell had once fought over. He always wanted collards, she favored marigolds. Now both had a place. Tressa crouched beside her, poking holes for tomato seedlings. Soil blackened their fingernails. No one cared. A wind chime stirred above them, barely audible. Gwendoray looked up. It was made from Wendell's old wrench, his fishing line, and a soda can she couldn't throw away. It wasn't pretty, but it sang. A lazy metallic hymn of mornings half-spoken and evenings shared in silence. In the mailbox, beneath ads for pizza and tire rotation, was a white envelope with her name handwritten in a script that startled her heart. She opened it slowly. The ink was smudged near the bottom as if from fingers. Too warm or uncertain. Mama, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say you were right. It was never about the house. I lost sight of what it meant. Your strength shames me. Your love raised me. I hope you find peace. Your son, always Crosby. No excuses, no demands. Just the words he hadn't had the courage to speak in court, or on the porch, or in any of the spaces they once shared. She folded it once neatly and slid it into the back cover of her Bible right where Wendell's letter lived. The ribbon, now stitched clean with yellow thread by Tressa, lay flat and whole across the pages. Behind her, a soft voice asked, "Ma'am, which bed is mine again?" It was the new girl, the nurse. Thin-wrist eyes too old for 25. Gwendaria smiled and pointed. "Second room on the right, the window faces east." "I've never had a window before," the girl said, touching the doorframe like it might vanish. Gwendaria didn't answer. She didn't need to. Inside, the women settled, placing toothbrushes in cups, writing names on dry erase fridge magnets. One hung a photo of a dog. Another hummed as she unpacked canned goods. Tressa wrote Porchlight Fund, Welcome Home on the whiteboard in the kitchen. She underlined it twice. Later, when the sun dipped behind the magnolia, Gwendaria sat in Wendell's old rocker, the one they nearly threw out when the seat cracked in 91. She didn't rock, just sat. Listened. The wind picked up, and the wrench chimes sang again, steadier now. Behind her, the porch light flicked on, soft and golden welcoming. The porch looked the same. Same faded planks Wendell once sanded every spring. Same wicker chair that creaked if you leaned too far to the left. Same wind-warped railing where they'd hang poinsettias come Christmas. But now it bore a hand-painted sign that read, Porchlight House, blue letters, outlined in gold by a girl who'd never known a front porch of her own. Gwendaria didn't say much that morning. She just watched from the bottom step as the first three women stepped through the door. A retired second-grade teacher with a soft limp, a line cook who still smelled faintly of grits and onions, and a nurse who refused to wear white anymore, said it reminded her of the hospital where everything ended. They each brought little. Some clothes, a photo or two, the kind of bags you pack when leaving is the only plan. But when they crossed that threshold, there was a stillness. Not silence, but stillness, as if the walls themselves breathed in relief. The magnolia tree swayed overhead. Its blossoms had come in too early this year, confused by the storm that never quite hit Mobile. Gwendaria looked up, narrowed her eyes at the branches like Wendell used to do before climbing a ladder. She didn't climb anything these days, not unless someone needed her to. Tressa brought her a mason jar of tea. "Mama, you sure you want to stay for the planting? It's July." Gwendaria nodded. "These roots need tending, same as people." In the garden beds beside the porch, she knelt, groaning a little, and showed the women where the soil was softest. They scattered marigold seeds, turned compost, and shared quiet facts. The teacher loved crossword puzzles. The nurse had once sung backup for a gospel quartet. The cook could gut a fish with one flick of her wrist. Gwendaria smiled. "Y'all are gonna be just fine." After the planting, as hands were wiped on jeans and sweat dripped into shirt collars, Gwendaria walked to the mailbox. She hadn't checked it in days. Inside was a single envelope. The paper was thick, the handwriting uncertain but familiar. She turned it over twice before sliding a finger under the seal. "Dear Mama, I won't ask you to forgive me. I know what I did. I was drowning, and instead of asking for help, I pulled you under too. This house, it was never mine. You were. I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. Your son, always Crosby." She stood motionless. The wind picked up a little, riffling the edges of the letter. Her eyes stung not just from heat. She folded it slowly like blessing a napkin at church and slipped it into the Bible. The ribbon, now stitched with yellow thread, held firm. From behind her, one of the new residents spoke. A woman with calloused hands and cautious eyes. "Ms. Linnell Quall." Gwendaria turned. The woman pointed at the porch. "This is the first safe place I've had in 6 years." Gwendaria smiled. "Then it's already worth it." She reached into her handbag, pulled out a small wind chime, and hung it on the porch's awning. It caught the breeze, instantly, soft clinks and gentle tings echoing through the air. It wasn't store-bought. Tressa had made it from Wendell's old wrench and fishing lures. A bit of work, a bit of rest. You think he'd mind? Tressa asked from the doorway. No, Gwendolen said. He'd be glad it's not rusting in the shed. The sun dipped lower. Heat clung to the skin like linen, heavy but familiar. Gwendolen sat down in Wendell's old chair, the one with the left side creak. But today it held steady. She didn't rock, she just listened. And the wind sang. The wind chime sang again this morning, clearer, softer somehow, like even the breeze had made peace with what passed. The porch still creaked, but now it did so under stories, not secrets, laughter, not lawsuits. What Wendell and I built was never just wooden walls, it was trust. And trust, even when broken, can be mended if someone's willing to hold the needle. Sometimes justice doesn't come with gavels. Sometimes it shows up with a garden shovel and a stitched ribbon. To anyone out there feeling betrayed, worn down, or pushed aside, there's still ground to plant something better. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story in the comments.